Welcome, welcome everybody to the next edition of the Sam Course podcast. Today I have Marc Overton, and Marc's a high performance coach and certified health expert specializing in metabolic health and holistic wellness for busy professionals. His background is in elite hospitality, and his life's journey across Asia and Europe brings him a unique grounded value to helping entrepreneurs and executives reclaim their energy, body confidence, and sustainable lifestyle through his signature Metabolic Reboot Program. Welcome, Marc, to the Stay on Course podcast.
Thank you so much, Judy. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, awesome. But before we get started, I ask all of my guests, what is your favorite food?
My favorite food has to be steak, and that's cooked in butter with sauteed vegetables as well. Preferably, maybe let's go asparagus.
Oh, that sounds good. What kind of steak do you like? What cut do you prefer?
Oof. I like filet mignon, as the French call it. Ribeye steak as well.
I love it. I love it. Okay, Marc, let's just talk a little bit about what you do and how you got to this place.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So what I do now is, as with the intro, is that I specialize in metabolic health, right? So I have a program which is focused solely on taking somebody from a state of normally without them realizing actually from sugar burner physiologically speaking, so metabolically speaking, to being able to mobilize stored body fat as fuel, right? And I'll get on to why that's so important and why that's such a game changer. But how did I get there? Because right now I'm 41. When I was in my 20s and early 30s, I was a really keen exerciser. In full transparency, just because I wanted to look good. I was living in tropical locations as an expat. I was spending a lot of time at like beach clubs and had a really vibrant kind of social life. And at that stage in my life, it's quite superficial, but that was important to me, right? But the even though I had done sports science at university as a sort of 19, 20, 21 year old and learned all about kind of body movement in that sense, my understanding of nutrition and metabolic health was non-existent really, and there was a lot of guesswork. So even though I thought I might be eating healthy, my diet was very carb heavy, and I was a somebody that would think about food pretty much all day long. Like even though I stayed, trim, food was always on my mind, and that was mainly came from the amount I exercise actually. And I was a chronic over-exerciser. I was really pushing myself, living under that kind of no pain, no gain mantra that's so common in sort of that mainstream idea of how we keep fit and well, right?
Yeah.
And what happened is when I got into my early 30s, just caught up with you. That kind of invincibility that you have in your youth started to wear off, I guess. And there was this one particular moment, I remember it very well. It was 2019, July, and I was living in Koh Samui, Thailand at the time, and I just got a very common chest infection. I say common, but nothing that you would necessarily worry about. A cold, kind of a bit of a cough is what I mean. And what happened is I continued to train. And the training that I was doing was high intensity interval training regularly, way too much, which I can go on to explain why that's a danger. Essentially, what I was doing was just completely suppressing my immune system. So even though I was fit and had this kind of like glowing tan because I was living in the tropics, so if you looked at me from and you didn't know me, you'd say this guy is fit and well. But actually, inside my immune system is completely suppressed, so much so that it couldn't battle back to fight this common cold, which then
Wow.
turned into bronchitis, which then turned into pneumonia, right? So, and that was a real kind of wake up call for me at that stage of my life. I was like, what is going on here? How can I be, I trained so much and tried to sort of eat healthy. Okay, fair enough. I had a bit of a party lifestyle in my 20s, but I was slowing down by this point. And I was just thinking, yeah, this something's not right here. This is not adding up. How can I get pneumonia, right? So that's when I started doing a lot more research, did a lot more. I went back to school actually and reinvented myself completely. I became a certified health coach, specializing in ancestral inspired philosophy. So looking back to when we were hunter gatherers for
Oh,
clues.
that's what that is. Okay.
That's what that is, yeah. And then, yeah, through a lot of self-experimentation, playing with how I ate, different foods I ate. So not just foods, but also patterns, starting to dabble with fasting and changing my approach to exercise. I just had breakthroughs, like incredible breakthroughs, so much so that I just kind of was like, okay, I need to get out there and help people because I know that I'm not the only one that's going through this, right? And that's kind of where I got to. So I'm fast forward from there, I'm now 41, sort of 6, 7 years on from that.
Yeah. Okay, so metabolic reboot. What are some of the ingredients for success about like what should we be thinking about if we want to reboot our system?
Yeah, it's a good, I mean, it's a great question. And like I said, the first thing is about the real secret is to start to understand what every mouthful of food does hormonally, right? Because that's what I think, that's what definitely what I was missing back in the day. And then now working with many, many clients of all different kind of fitness levels, by the way. You don't necessarily need to be somebody that's been training all of your life. You could be a complete beginner. But that knowledge alone, and it doesn't have to be go to university and get a master's degree, you know. Sometimes it could just take, as little as, half a day, of study, really, of just reading, or of 10 minutes a day, really. But understanding the term metabolic flexibility, and again, in layman's terms, that simply means not being a sugar burner, so the body's not dependent on using glucose or as a energy source, basically, and it's able to efficiently burn different fuel sources, aka fatty acids as well, right? So that's where that real kind of shift happens. So most people, without realizing, just because it's nobody's fault, right? But it's just because our Western diet essentially, and not just in the last few years. This has been going on for hundreds of years since the agricultural revolution, really, since we centered our diet around carbohydrates, right? Breakfast, lunch, dinner. And if you think about a typical breakfast where I am in England, it's very kind of like cereal based. So a lot of people will eat cereal or granola, and they'll have like an orange juice, for example, and maybe some milk, excuse me, in their breakfast. That's a carbohydrate bomb right there. Same over in the continent in Europe, they'll have similar. Whether it's in France, they'll have croissants. In America, I know you guys, I'm not saying everybody does this, but I know things like pancakes and those types of things
It's
are,
just awful. If you eat, for me, if I eat any of that in the morning, I'm crashing by like 11 and
yeah.
I get a flash migraine actually.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. That's common symptoms, right? It's really hard, man. And it's like I said, so many people are sort of stuck in that. It's nobody's fault. It's just the way that we've been born into this situation. It's a cultural thing, and it's difficult as well because there's so many nuances to it as well. We can smell something and it reminds us, like a food is what I mean, and it reminds us sort of bring us back happy memories from childhood and stuff. So it's not always easy to just break away from certain food groups, right? It takes a bit of a step-by-step process, both psychologically and for the body as well. But the good news is a metabolic reboot. Essentially, what we're doing is we're going in and we're looking at obviously diets, the biggest one. We're going to have a look at what food groups we're eating, and we're going to bring it, um, bring that kind of like that the actual amount of carbohydrates you might be consuming in one day way down during a reboot process. Doesn't have to be like that forever, but during a reboot process, we're trying to evoke a metabolic response as quickly as possible without also evoking the symptoms that we don't want. So your listeners may have heard of a term called low carb flu, or they've just heard people that have said they've tried intermittent fasting or keto diets or it's low carb approaches essentially, but they start to feel pretty crappy, quite quickly, so they get headaches and brain fog and sometimes hunger pangs and all these kind of sometimes even queasiness. These are all kind of symptoms of that when you start to come off a state of carb dependency too quickly. So this is a really not the nicest analogy to use, but I hope you don't mind. But I use it with clients regularly because it's effective. And it's like if you imagine a smoker, somebody that's been addicted to smoking for let's say 10 years, and then they tried to give up, or they said they were going to give up on Monday. But here's the kicker: like imagine they didn't know or understand, they didn't grasp that they were actually addicted to nicotine.
Mm.
Right. So when they went into that week on Monday, very quickly within an hour, probably they're going to get these really significant kind of withdrawal symptoms, but they don't understand why. So of course they're not going to get very far before they give up, right? So it's a bit like if somebody's been sugar dependent, which a lot of us, I certainly was for all of my adult life up until 5, 6 years ago. If we just do it, throw ourselves in the deep end with, okay, I'm going to try a intermittent fast. I'm not going to eat until 12 or 1 p.m. But on the back of being carb dependent, you're going to have a pretty tough ride because you're not going to understand why you're getting all these rubbish symptoms kind of showing up, right? So a really well guided metabolic reboot just eases that whole process, and it's a bit like having you know taking nicotine gum, let's say. So,
Mm.
and it doesn't have to be difficult. And when I work with clients, even by day 4, day 5, the three main offenders that tend to put people off when it comes to sort of trying to eat more healthy and trying to lose weight, which is hunger. Nobody likes feeling hungry, right? Appetite, monstrous appetite is almost impossible to nullify. You might be able to do it with willpower for 1 or 2 days, but if you've got a strong appetite, it's for a reason because your body's asking to be replenished, and you're just going to keep going, right? And especially for like refined sweet things, if that's what you've been eating. And then the other one is cravings again, likely to be for refined sugars and things like that. So once you go through a reboot, all of those free offenders just naturally nullify. And suddenly you wake up one day, or you suddenly realize that you haven't had any cravings, you haven't had your mid-morning hunger pang, and you're not always thinking about food.
Yeah.
So
What
there,
is the reboot like? What do you do to get to that point?
so you have to, like I say, go through a process. The first thing to do is to learn about what I call a food pyramid. I mean, I call it a food pyramid, the food pyramid, right? There's food pyramids everywhere. We have one in England. I know you guys have one in the States as well. And it's kind of like relearning what that pyramid is.
Flip
So
it. I've
it's the
heard
same.
that you need to flip the food pyramid.
Yeah, yeah, but I think that's pretty good advice, right? There's sometimes we don't need to make everything so complicated and busy and just be like quite straight down the middle, right? So I think if we look at the standard pyramid that's out there from our governments, it's all the bottom base is the one that we should be, concerned about because it's all based around grains essentially, right? So carbohydrates and grains. So if you think about our diets being based around cereals, rice, pasta, noodles, breads, all
I
of the
mean, I don't
pastries.
know. I think they try to sabotage us. There's a little bit of a conspiracy theory here going on in my head. I
Yeah,
don't know why they told people to do that. I mean, I don't know why. I mean, somebody knew the answer.
yeah.
But now
Well,
we're like conditioned to all these sugary things, but the truth is like everyone's going back to the carnivore diet. Like that's
right.
what people are talking about.
Definitely, that carnivore diet is a really, really hot sort of buzzy diet at the moment, and I understand why. I mean, this is just my personal opinion. Like, I also think that we, by design, we should also be eating fruits and vegetables. Fruit, I think fruits it requires a little bit of a reframe, right? We're not designed to be eating fruits indulgently every day, right? Because we know they're full of fructose, right? They're carbohydrate bombs, so spike your blood sugar essentially,
Oh
and body
yeah.
needs to release that insulin, right? And that's what creates that kind of hormonal roller coaster.
Exactly. I
But
can't even drink orange juice. That's the other thing. I can't even drink it. Like, yeah, I get so sick just by drinking orange juice.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's literally just like sugar water. Of course, it's got some vitamins in there. Like, I'm always quite careful because I don't want to demonize things.
Right, right.
But like, fruits are certainly our friends. We love fruits, but it's again going back to that idea. If you imagine what our genetics are expecting us, right? So if we rewind 10,000 years, the agricultural revolution has not happened. As a species, we've evolved, let's say 2.5 million years or so. So our genetics kind of expect us to eat and move in a certain way, right?
Right.
That, anything we can pick, pull, pluck, hunt, catch, I guess, food by Mother Nature, right? That's pretty much going to put us in a good place if we base our diets around that. So flipping that goes back to flipping that pyramid, right? At the bottom of that pyramid, all of those kind of like grains and those starchy vegetables that we would have also grown, right? That wouldn't have been the case. We're not designed to eat that kind of high carbohydrate diet or grain diet because grains can also be problematic, pro-inflammatory, problems with digestion. Obviously, gluten is quite famous, right? And I think we're all probably we all have an element of gluten intolerance. I think just not necessarily celiac, but a gluten
Well, and
intolerance.
I think like I don't know about where you are, but in America, like I can't even eat bread anymore. I can't eat pasta. I can't eat bread. Like there's so many things that I can't eat because it just makes it bloats my stomach. And I know I don't have celiac, but I definitely don't eat bread. I don't eat bread anymore. I cheat a
Yeah.
little bit. I cheat. I do cheat. But I'm just saying, like, our food has been completely poisoned because if I go to Italy probably and have the same pizza or bread, I'd probably be able to eat it.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with you with that. The decline in the standard of food, if you like, and this is across, all different types of food groups. has significantly declined, and that's a whole different conversation. It's extremely worrying. And it's a tough one, and it's one of the one. This is what I kind of do, like in the metabolic reboot process. Is like it's not just about what we're trying to do from a it's also installing all of this kind of like knowledge on how to look at things. So
Yeah.
even the word that you just used there, which is so common, which is like cheat, right? That cheat. The way that I try to help clients view it or change is actually what I call planned deviation.
A planned deviation. That's so great.
It's got a much nicer ring to it, hasn't
I
it?
love
Right?
that. It's like me telling people your opportunities for growth instead of your weaknesses.
Yeah, definitely. It's just putting
Planned
that
deviations.
planned deviation, and it's got a positive ring to it, and it's actually so when you think about it, something that we, I also go by a philosophy of the 80/20 when it comes to not just diet but lifestyle. So for me, if it's okay to say personally, what that I don't I don't drink that much alcohol anymore at all, but when I do, it tends to be rosé when I'm in the south of France. I'm half French in the summertime, and occasionally, maybe once a year, if I catch up with my English mates, like my old schoolmates, or I might have a couple of beers, right? And I know that's going to happen, and so I know it's going to happen on a certain weekend. So I'm like that's a planned deviation weekend, and rather than demonizing it or giving my hard self a hard time, I look forward to it, man. And I'm like that's a
Right, the
planned
planned
deviation weekend,
deviation. I
and
mean, that I love. I love the planned deviation weekend. I have a planned deviation to eat. My downfall is fried foods. So I like fried fish. I like fried chicken,
yeah.
sometimes French fries. Like that's my thing. So and what's interesting with pizza, I love pizza. I eat gluten-free pizza. It's very rarely that I will actually eat a piece of or a pizza, like a real pizza. I think I had one like a year and a half ago. But I really just ate that pizza and I just kind of like let it go. But I love
Yeah.
the planned deviation. And what about fried food? Like, how bad is it for you?
Yeah, it's kind of like bad news, I'm afraid, like because again, going back to that kind of like yeah, going back to that pyramid, where we talked about sometimes trying to keep it quite simple. So a lot of people ask me like, "Hey, Mark, you specialize in, let's say, primal health, right? That's what I've specialized in." And if I was going to say what type of diet I follow, if I had to put a name to it, it'd be a
Yeah.
primal diet, not paleo, because paleo don't really eat dairy. Where in a primal diet, dairy's cool, like so is sort of dark chocolate that's 85% plus, so it's kind of a little bit slightly different than paleo, but that's kind of what I would call it, right? However, I don't think it's always beneficial to throw out diets and names, right? But what I do think is beneficial is to learn and understand what are really crucial to avoid or at least significantly reduce, right?
Mm.
And then the rest of it, what goes on around that, then the kind of come if you know what to avoid, then you're going to be in a good place straight away. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So those three things are, and they're not going to be a surprise to anybody. Obviously, sugars or added sugars, or let's just say processed foods as well. Grains, unfortunately, like because as I said, that's it's not to demonize them. Once in a blue moon, it's not going to really hurt anybody. But if you're basing your whole diet, breakfast, lunch, and dinner around grains, which so many people do. That could look like I said, cereal could look like a sandwich at lunch, could look like a taco, could look like pasta, noodles, rice. These are all kind of grains, right? So think about how many people base their diets around these, right?
Yeah.
And then the final one being, let's say, industrial seed oils
Sugar.
or
Oh, seed oils. Not
refined oils.
sugar. Sugar wasn't in there. Did you say sugar?
Yeah, I said sugar. Sugar is
Okay.
definitely in there. But out of all of those three, I would suggest if not that this is really a good game, but I would say if you're only going to avoid one, I would say oils would be the one, right? Because the sort of oils that you're going to find in a deep fat fryer,
Are the
are,
bad ones.
yes, I mean they're super pro-inflammatory and just generally really bad news.
Yeah.
Like it's just toxic.
I
Yeah.
mean, I use a lot of I only use olive oil at home when I do stuff, when I cook things. So, but that's my planned deviation. Am I allowed to do that?
Yeah, look, you're allowed to do anything you want, right? That's the beauty of life. We can make decisions, and the other beautiful thing about it is that we can make, we can, tomorrow's a new day, as I say, right?
Sure,
So
sure.
that's, and again, plan deviation, everything. If you know that French fries is your thing, and there's no way that you can eliminate that totally, then just work towards a place where it becomes a plan deviation rather than a staple in your diet, and you're going to be in a much better place.
Yeah. All
And
right.
see
Let
where
me
that
just,
goes.
I want to, before we close out, there's two things I want to talk about because the metabolic reboot, there's two. So there's what you eat, I think sleep and the exercise. Like those are the three things that come up for me when I think about taking care of myself. What is your take on sleep? Let's get to that one.
Yeah, it's vital. One of the most important things that we can get control of, I guess, which is not easy. Again, it's not easy at all. I mean, I've got a 6 and 8 year old, so it's getting a little bit better. But I mean, I remember, 3, 4 years ago, even, and it was tough because you have no control over certain things, right? Some of it can be external if you live in a city and you've got outside noise and with other bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But what you can certainly do is again learn just by research or reading or getting some expert advice, kind of how to create a good sleep hygiene is called. That's the actual technical term. That helps. Sometimes even the smallest little tweaks to your bedroom can make a difference.
Yeah.
Again, it's amazing, really. But yeah, in terms of the time frames, like some people will say, I mean, the traditional is like 8 to 6, isn't it? 6 to 8, right? Everybody's different, but then there's also season becomes a big part of it as well. I don't know if you've noticed that, but during the winter months, if you're living in the sort of colder areas, and when it gets dark much earlier, then we tend to sort of go into hibernate mode, right? And it's much harder to wake up in those kind of dark mornings. I mean, that's that time of year we might need even as much as 9 hours sleep, right? Whereas in the summer months when it's days are much shorter, you might feel absolutely rejuvenated on 6 hours. I know
Wow.
I'm like that. I can definitely relate to that. Like it's definitely if we're in tune with the circadian rhythm as much as possible, that helps as well. Consistency helps massively.
Yeah.
Um, and obviously, it goes without saying that one of the biggest arm wrestles that we have in probably most households this day is that kind of digital connection. And are we actually giving thought to when we disconnect? So if I just finish with and just say again, another analogy that I love to use is if you imagine a beaded necklace, right? And this represents the morning and the evening as a routine. So if you imagine the first hour of the day, what does Tony Robbins call it? The hour of power, right? And the evening being that kind of last, say, let's say 60 minutes before you go to actually, it's in lights out. Okay, now I'm going to go to sleep. That would be like the last hour of the day. What we want is kind of routines, and as long as we can keep those routines as dialed in as possible, we're going to be in a much better place because everything becomes consistent. There's no rules to these routines, by the way. Some people might wake up, get straight into sunlight and exercise or body movement. Some people might wake up and go straight into a meditation, for example. So there's no sort of like right or wrong, but we definitely want to be off digital stimulation first thing in the morning
Right.
and checking emails for getting straight into it because obviously it's first of all it's going to affect the blue light, but then also cortisol is going to go straight in, and it's not a great way to start the day. Bedtime routines: get off digital devices. Try and put yourself into a state where you're not in work mode on that last hour of the day. During the winter months, or it doesn't have to be winter months, but lighting candles and getting artificial lights off can really be helpful just to release melatonin. And you're gonna find that you're just in a much better mood. Energy levels are going to be much more consistent. Your performance at work, well, at work and at home, when you're with your family, your patience, all of the other good stuff, is just going to naturally sink into a place of what you want, as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to survive on poor sleep is complete opposite, as we know, right? That's really the gist of it. So from a recovery point of view, from an anti-aging point of view, um, literally I could go on and on and on, and that's why sleep is so
So
important.
important. All right, real quick, tell us what's the I don't want to go like crazy here, but what is the minimum amount that you should be exercising to make the most maximum effort?
Hang on, okay, let me get that question right. The minimum amount to
Well, I
get.
mean, what do you suggest people do for exercise? I know I think what I was told by my doctor, because I have a little bit of high cholesterol. That's where I kind of, but I always wonder if that is even right anymore because everybody has these like different things, half hour, 5 times a week. I think that's what they told me. A half hour a day of cardio 5 times a week, they want me to do.
Got you. And the where we have to unpack that, and I know I don't really have the time or the the we don't have the resources to go into it today, right? So if I'll try and keep it sort of like surface level. But the first thing that we really need to unpack is that word cardio, because cardio is so again misunderstood by so many well-intentioned people. Now, essentially, walking down to get your mail in the morning from the box is cardio, right? Doing a strength training or resistance training workout, whether you're using body weight or weights in the gym, still cardio, right? But a lot of people they detach from that and they think of cardio as
Walking or
being on the
running,
same, yeah,
walking,
walking or
running,
running,
swimming, things that are going to elevate your heart rate.
right? Or just that kind of traditional, put the headband on and the running shoes on, or be on a cardio machine or elliptical. Um, of course, that's cardio too. Okay, but the point I'm trying to make is that we need to understand, like any type of body movement, really, where we elevate the heart rate to a certain point, is cardio. Now, where the real hole is, and this is where I really, really try to spread my message and help people with, because it totally changed the game for me. Because I used to be a big cardio, I was a cardio animal. I was running 10K probably almost every other day, fast pace on a treadmill. And I call that huff and puff cardio. And it's any type of effort where you're like really huffing and puffing. That's what I call black hole training. And you actually want to avoid that completely. Um, it's not that you want to, I'm not, just to be clear, I'm not saying you should not go out and do any type of like cardio, but it's just understanding the zones and what that's actually doing, right? So, as an example, let's say you went out for a gentle jog. If you want to get technical, let's say in zone two, if you're sort of doing your own research, another good marker is if you're, let's say you're jogging with a partner, you're able to have a really comfortable conversation, right? So that's that zone there is a safe zone, it's a fat burning zone, and you're not going to be draining your energy, where later on in the day your body's going to ask for that energy back. Guess what? You're going to have a big appetite. Okay, it's called calorie compensation. And that's again a really misunderstood kind of play in this whole fat loss or weight control world. And then going back to the beginning of the question, I think what we need to do is understand what, or not understand, but we need to own what we're doing the exercise for, right? Because that really depends on what we're doing. Is it for fat loss? Is it just for well-being, to get out there and break whatever sedentary patterns and being connected to a computer? Is it because we're getting ready for some kind of endurance event like a marathon? Is it because we're getting ready for a ski holiday? It really depends on what the goal is in terms of how we'd approach it, right? And the advice that I'd give. But for most people, for just general health and either keeping fat off or trying to lose weight, cardio, you need to be, let's say, focus on doing 3 to 4 times a week, no, let's say half an hour of very, very gentle cardio, but try to get out of that mindset even. And what I would suggest focus more on is getting out of the gym gear. I don't mean literally, I mean like from a mindset. Just remember that your body doesn't care or know if you're wearing sports gear, right? All your body is looking to do is move at every single opportunity. Right. So as soon as you start to embody that sort of shift, that paradigm shift, and you start thinking, okay, where can I walk as much as possible? Walking is the quintessential human body movement, right? So if you can walk, if you can park half a kilometer away from the grocery store and get a little bit more steps in for the day, that's a win. If
Yeah.
you, I mean,
Okay.
the classic cliche of taking the stairs rather than the elevators goes without saying, right? Can you take business calls on the phone while you're walking or walking around your block? All of these things will add up over time and have a huge effect on your overall health, fitness, and sort of weight loss efforts.
Right. 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 Okay. I like that. I like that a lot. I like the body movement part of that. Just kind of shifting that. Mark, this has been an amazing conversation. Where can our audience find out more about how to work with you?
So I tend to use LinkedIn as my main social media platform. Pretty easy to find me there because it's Metabolic Mark. I'm sure there's not that many Metabolic Marks. Mark spelt with a C on LinkedIn. But really, yeah, to anybody that's listening in your audience, so look, just reach out, connect with me. I'm a total open book. I also offer free 30-minute consultations, sort of no strings consultations, where we'll just have a look at how you're moving your body, how you're eating, maybe some goals, some of your struggles, and I'll see if I can give you some actionable advice too. And you can book appointments actually directly through my LinkedIn. And if it's okay with you, Julie, I'll just also add a link to your show notes. And anybody that has interest to learn more about my backstory, but more importantly, the philosophy and of a metabolic reboot, I've actually got a 45-minute pre-recorded web class, which I will share the link with you for anybody that would like to see that.
All right. That's amazing. Well, Metabolic Mark, thanks for being a guest on the Stay on Course podcast. I found this to be a very interesting conversation.
Thank you so much for having me, Julie. Have a good day.